The first thing I noticed was the smell: wet rot, charred hair, and chlorine. Then I saw them, crawling from shadows with sick, empty smiles, faces streaked with filth, eyes black and hungry. One let out a high, choking laugh and bolted toward me. I ran, but every street led deeper into the infected city. I turned back for the breach. It was gone. I was trapped. It was supposed to be harmless, just observation, a test of an experimental device left gathering dust in a Cold War bunker. They said it would open a window into another world for 10 minutes. No physical contact, just a glimpse. I was curious. I'd heard whispers of the Project Gateway buried under the Nevada desert, a failed attempt at controlled dimensional travel. They said the tech never worked, but strange data had surfaced. Leaked comms full of static and phrases like "do not cross" and "protocol delta." When I was offered the chance to observe a test, I jumped at it. The machine was an ugly thing. Wires snaked around cracked monitors, rusted metal panels hummed with latent energy, and coils thrummed like a beating heart. It looked fragile, cobbled together from decades of abandoned tech. I stood inside the projection ring, surrounded by half-dead computers and 2 operators who barely acknowledged me. The countdown began. The shimmer appeared, a wavering slit in the air, light fractured into jagged shards. It flickered like a dying signal, but I felt something pulling at me. The air thickened, the hairs on my arms rising. I leaned closer, curiosity outweighing caution. The pull became a violent yank, and the world twisted. My vision shattered into static, and I was gone. I woke sprawled on cracked pavement, under a sky stained orange and brown, thick with dust and chemical haze. My ears rang, and I tasted copper. The silence was heavy, broken only by the faint drip of water and the distant groan of shifting metal. I pushed myself up, breath catching in my throat. The shimmer was gone. Ahead, a road sign tilted at a broken angle. Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The name sent ice down my spine. In my world, it was just a quiet Midwestern city. But in the Crazies, it was the supposed safe haven David and Judy fled to, only to realize the infection had already spread. Here, it wasn't fiction. I crept forward, stepping over shards of broken glass and twisted debris. Abandoned cars lined the streets, their doors ajar, windows shattered. Bullet holes pocked their flanks. One car was burned to the frame, the melted metal pooled around it like wax. A low sound echoed from somewhere, wet, rhythmic, almost like a laugh. I froze, heart hammering, listening. It came from behind a rusted delivery truck with its back doors swinging, a thin, wet cough. I turned slowly. A man staggered into view, his skin pale and blistered, clothes clinging to his body like wet rags. His mouth was split wide in a grotesque grin, teeth bloody. His eyes were deep, bottomless pits. He coughed again, red mist spraying from his lips, and let out a sound between a giggle and a sob. More shapes emerged from doorways, crawling from storm drains, pulling themselves over crumbling fences. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, as if their joints were working against them. One gripped a kitchen knife, another a broken piece of pipe. Their clothes were soaked through, water streaming from sleeves and pant legs. I realized it then. It was the water, just like Ogden Marsh. The Trixie virus spread through the water supply. The infection didn't kill them. It made them something else, something violent and unpredictable. One of them lunged, a rusted hammer raised high. I turned and bolted, heart pounding, weaving through alleys as their distorted laughter echoed after me. I ducked into a hardware store, slamming the door behind me. Inside, shelves were overturned, glass littered the floor, and the air reeked of mold and gasoline. A fluorescent light buzzed overhead, flickering weakly. On the wall, scrawled in a child's handwriting, "Don't drink the water. They're coming." I backed away, bile rising in my throat. Outside, shadows pressed against the glass, faces pale and grinning, hands smeared with blood. They watched me, their laughter a thin, metallic whisper. I fled deeper into the store, flashlight beam trembling as I descended into the basement. The stairs creaked under my weight, the air growing colder, damper. I reached a rusted metal door, streaked with grime and marked with a faded biohazard symbol. I forced it open and stumbled into a makeshift bunker. The walls were covered in maps of Cedar Rapids, marked with X's and military notations. Cots were overturned, ration crates scattered, and the floor was smeared with bloody handprints. A radio crackled nearby, spitting out garbled words.
Containment failed. Execute Delta Protocol. Cedar Rapids compromised.
In the corner, a man slumped in a torn biohazard suit. His visor was cracked, his face pale and streaked with blood. He whispered, "They know. They see us. They're coming." His body convulsed violently. Black veins pulsed beneath his skin, splitting it open. Something moved inside him, twisting, writhing. His last breath was a wet, rattling laugh. I ran. Back up the stairs, through the flickering light, past the shattered door. The infected were waiting, their heads turned toward me as one, mouths splitting into wide grins. One raised a bloodied hand, fingers twitching in a parody of a wave. I was trapped. The infected pressed against the shattered glass above, their black, glistening eyes fixed on me, their laughter thin and sharp as splintering bone. The bunker was little more than a tomb, rations overturned, blood smeared across cracked tiles, maps of Cedar Rapids scrawled with X's and warning symbols. I backed into the far corner, breath ragged, flashlight beam trembling. The radio crackled again.
Containment failed. Execute Delta Protocol. Cedar Rapids compromised.
A low moan echoed from the stairs above. Shadows shifted. The infected were finding another way in. I couldn't stay here. I scanned the room, desperately searching for an exit. There, a rusted maintenance hatch half hidden beneath a collapsed cot. I dropped to my knees, tearing aside debris. The hatch groaned as I forced it open, revealing a narrow tunnel leading down into the dark. I didn't hesitate. I crawled through, the air thick with mildew and rot. My palms scraped against wet concrete as I dragged myself forward, the laughter above fading into distant echoes. The tunnel descended beneath the city, connecting to old storm drains and maintenance corridors. Water dripped from corroded pipes overhead, splashing into shallow pools laced with black residue. I emerged hours later, filthy, breathless, and shaken, into the back alleys of Cedar Rapids, far from the hardware store and its bunker. But the city was no safer here. The infected weren't chasing, not yet. They were patient, herding me inward, deeper into the city's rotting heart. I crouched behind a collapsed dumpster, peering into the street. Cedar Rapids had once been a clean grid of suburban streets, busy intersections, strip malls glowing with neon. Here, it was an open grave, water pooled at the curbs, slick with oil and blood. Black residue streaked the cracked asphalt. The air reeked of chlorine and wet decay. undercut by a faint chemical tang. The infection hadn't come from the air, or from bites, or random chance. It was the water. I saw the evidence everywhere. Streaks of black sludge trailing from burst hydrants, manhole covers trembling with the surge beneath. The infected gathered around leaking pipes, cupping handfuls of tainted water to their mouths. Their bodies twitched, some distended grotesquely, flesh bloated and split, as if they were becoming part of the water itself. I passed a daycare center, its windows boarded, a crude warning scrawled in red paint. Water kills. The front yard was littered with abandoned toys and tiny shoes. Through a crack in the boards, I glimpsed small, curled forms, their skins slick and gray. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. I pressed on. Everywhere I turned, the military's desperation was scrawled across the city like graffiti. Scorched Humvees abandoned at intersections, biohazard symbols spray-painted over collapsing buildings, sandbag checkpoints reduced to twisted rubble. Soldiers' bodies lay tangled in razor wire, weapons still holstered. Their faces were frozen in terror. I stumbled into a roadside diner, its windows intact but its interior stripped bare. The air was thick with mildew and the faint hiss of leaking gas. Someone had scrawled a message in soot across the wall. "They poisoned us. It's the water. Don't let them touch you." I crept behind the counter as a sound echoed from the kitchen, a faint slosh of footsteps. A figure emerged, a man in a tattered cook's uniform, his skin blistered and raw, lips split into a grotesque smile. His eyes were black and empty. He dragged a cleaver along the tile floor, muttering softly, a broken lullaby I couldn't understand. He paused, head tilting as if listening. His smile widened. "Come eat," he whispered. "Come eat. Come eat." I held my breath. He turned, shuffling back into the kitchen, cleaver scraping behind him. The sound faded. I slipped out through the back, careful to avoid puddles of standing water. The infected were gathering near the leaking water towers, tall, skeletal structures streaked with black residue. One had ruptured, spilling a steady stream into the gutters. The infected cupped their hands beneath the flow, drinking deeply, their laughter echoing through the streets like broken music. I crossed a playground, the swings creaking in the wind. A woman in a blood-stained dress sat in one of them, head tilted, humming a tuneless melody. Her hands were raw, nails torn. As I passed, I heard her whisper, "The water's clean, the water's clean, the water's clean." I kept moving, my goal fixed now. If I could reach the city's industrial district, where the breach device was housed, I might find a way to reactivate it. But as I crossed the swollen Cedar River, I saw the extent of the collapse. The water was black and churning, bodies snagged on debris. Military barges sat half-sunken near the banks, decks abandoned. Overhead, helicopters circled, floodlights sweeping the ruins. I ducked beneath the bridge, watching. They weren't searching for survivors. They were dropping canisters, black drums that cracked open, releasing a chemical mist that crept low over the streets like a poisonous fog. The military wasn't coming to save anyone. They were here to erase the evidence. A hand clutched my shoulder. I spun, heart leaping into my throat. A man in a ripped hazmat suit staggered back, visor cracked, blood leaking from his mouth. His voice was a rasp, barely audible.
"Too late. It's in everything. The food, the rain, the soil.
You can't run.
He collapsed at my feet, convulsing violently, his skin split, black veins pulsing beneath the surface, something twisting inside him. His last breath was a sharp, wet laugh. I turned and fled, the hiss of the chemical fog growing louder, the infected drawn by its scent, gathering like carrion birds. I stumbled through back streets, lungs burning with each breath. The chemical fog rolled thicker now, heavier, pressing close against the ruined buildings like a smothering hand. My skin itched from it, a faint stinging wherever it touched. The infected were behind me, drawn not by my scent, but by the fog's promise of more water, more Trixie. I was almost out of options. The military helicopters circled high above, silent now, their floodlights snapping off as if their mission was done. I knew better. They weren't leaving. They were waiting for the fog to do its work, to wipe the city clean. Every street I turned down was blocked. Collapsed buildings, overturned trucks, walls of sandbags abandoned by soldiers who never made it out. The only way forward was toward the industrial district, where I hoped the breach device might be located, or at least something I could use to power it back up. I crossed a railway yard littered with tanker cars, the rails slick with oil and blood. The air was thick with static, a low hum, rising from rusted speakers, mounted to crumbling walls.
All survivors are to be considered infected. Execute on site. No evacuation is authorized.
The message repeated, crackling and distorted. I ducked into a train maintenance shed, its metal walls scorched and pockmarked. Inside, I found evidence of the military's last stand. Empty crates of ammunition, ration packs scattered across the floor, and, at the far end, a bank of generators and communication equipment, still humming faintly with residual power. I scanned the setup. The breach device wasn't here, but the comms were still active. A single monitor flickered weakly, displaying fragmented data feeds from satellite surveillance. I watched as the images cycled, infrared overlays of Cedar Rapids, glowing white-hot with heat signatures, clusters of infected moving through the city like migrating herds. Dotted lines highlighted the spread of Trixie through the water system, branching like a spiderweb across the state. One feed caught my eye, a blurry, grainy video of a containment team in hazmat suits, wading through waist-high water. They weren't decontaminating. They were deliberately rupturing water lines, flooding low-lying districts with contaminated runoff. They were spreading the infection. My stomach turned. This wasn't a containment effort. It was a controlled escalation, a decision made long before I ever stumbled into this world. I scanned the control panel. The signal amplifier here was powerful enough to send a localized data burst, maybe even reconnect with the breach device back at the bunker where I arrived. But it needed manual input from the satellite relay a few blocks away. I weighed the risks: stay here and be overtaken by the fog and infected, or gamble on the relay, hoping to open the breach long enough to slip through. I moved. Outside, the infected had gathered near the railway yard entrance. They weren't rushing me. They stood in a loose semicircle watching, their heads cocked, mouths open in silent laughter, their bodies dripping with water. One of them, a woman with stringy hair and a torn uniform, raised a hand in a broken parody of a wave. I skirted them, keeping low, heart hammering in my chest. Their eyes followed me, but they didn't move. Not yet. I reached the satellite relay tower. It stood amid a collapsed office park, its dishes canted at odd angles, cables trailing like vines. The ground was flooded, ankle deep with dark water. I gritted my teeth and splashed through it, every step a risk. I could feel it soaking into my boots, seeping up through the seams. The Trixie. Inside the relay station, I found the terminal still operational. I patched into the control system, overriding the access protocols. The screen flashed to life, the signal bar rising steadily. I keyed in the manual command to transmit a reconnection request, hoping the breach device back in the bunker was still functional. A sharp sound outside, wood splintering. A shadow crossed the doorway. I turned as an infected man stepped inside, his eyes black and gleaming, water streaming from his mouth. He staggered forward, mumbling, "No one leaves. No one leaves. No one leaves." I grabbed a rusted pipe from the floor and swung, catching him across the face. He crumpled, but others were following. 3, 4, maybe more, drawn by the signal's pulse. I keyed in the final override and sprinted for the back exit as the screen flickered a single message. Breach reconnecting. Stand by. I ran through the flooded streets, slipping in the water, heart pounding as I heard the infected closing in. Their laughter echoed, a twisted chorus, broken by the hiss of the chemical fog sweeping through the alleys. By the time I reached the bunker, the door was ajar. The infected had gotten in, but the breach device was intact, humming faintly. The air shimmered around it, faint as a dying ember. I slammed the control panel with my fist, the shimmer surging. One infected figure, a man in a biohazard suit with half his face gone, lunged at me from the shadows. I shoved him back into the breach field as it flared. His body convulsed, limbs twisting unnaturally as he vanished into the crack. The shimmer grew brighter. I grabbed the edge of the control ring, feeling it vibrate beneath my fingers. The laughter of the infected rose to a crescendo behind me. I stepped through. I emerged gasping, collapsing on a cold concrete floor. The air was clean, dry. Bright, sterile lights buzzed overhead. I was back in the Nevada black site. The researchers were gone. The control room was empty. My breath slowed. Relief surged through me. Then I heard it. A faint coughing. I turned. One of the researchers stood at the far end of the room, his hand trembling as he wiped blood from his mouth. His eyes gleamed black, just for a moment, before he smiled.